On Black Tuesday, the stock market crashed. The industrial index dropped nearly 10%, which wiped out all gains from the previous year and made stocks in many companies relatively worthless. The value of stocks continued to decline for many years following. At first, this was thought to be the first and the most important cause of the Great Depression. Another cause was the lack of diversification in the economy. The economy focused on two major industries, construction and automobiles. When these industries began to decline, it had a major effect on the economy. Unemployment rates soared. Up to one-third of the workforce was unemployed, and others experienced major cuts in wages, hours, or both. Another cause was the maldistribution of power and weakness in consumer demand. Third, the credit structure of the economy was not sufficient. Farmers were in debt and had no money to return the money they owed. Banks were in deep trouble, and when the stock market crashed, banks tied up in the stock market suffered badly. Another factor was the international trade in America. Europe no longer had such a great demand for American goods as it had in the past, therefore it affected the economy negatively. Lastly, the nation's debt as a whole was high due to Europe not paying America back, forcing them to reduce debts on Germany and Austria. People soon realized that the stock market crash didn't cause the depression, but instead triggered a series of events that would greatly affect the economy. In March of 1929, we received our new president, Herbert Hoover. In an attempt to rebuild our once great economy, he created the Hoover Program, consisting of the Agricultural Marketing Act, among others. He began his works by inviting business leaders, laborers, and farmers to the White House to propose his new program of voluntary cooperation for recovery, convincing them not to lay off laborers and to provide them with better wages or proper hours. This ultimately failed because of the poor economy. Later, he made another failed attempt to restore the economy by increasing the government budget by $423 million. He used this money for public works and construction, but this was not nearly enough. His next proposal was the Agricultural Marketing Act, which he had been working on since before the major stock market crash. With this act, he aimed to help American farmers by maintaining their prices, buying surplus produce, and releasing the Hawley-Smoot tariff to limit competition from other countries. Americans became impatient with all of his failures, and much hope was lost for the economy. Because he was becoming so desperate, Hoover made a final attempt to fix things with the RFC. The RFC helped banks from closing and provided financial aid to railroads and businesses. But the bill made no significant change and therefore failed as well, and recovering the nation's economy from the Depression became seemingly impossible.
The Great Depression and the recession of 2007 and 2008 have many similarities and differences. Both causes of the crisis came from the federal government. Massive spending from both presidents in two different eras was a major similarity. The increase of the federal debt under Roosevelt and Obama was very similar. During Roosevelt's first two terms, national debt doubled and is suspected to do the same in years to come. Also, spending more money did not help the fact that unemployment increased. Tax rates were raised and tax hikes were taken. This would still lead to more large spending. Differences. The Great Depression had a severe double dip, but the recession of 2007-2008 is at a steady growth rate. Also, there are differences in levels of deficient spending, manufacturing capacity, and bank foreclosures. There was only a modest decline in the gross domestic product during the Great Recession. The Great Depression and the Great Recession are very similar but different. The Great Depression had more of an effect on our economy, unlike the recession, which we are still fighting strong against.
The New Deal. The Roosevelt administration, or the New Deal, was presented by Franklin Roosevelt during the 1930s. The goal of this was to restore the government, economics, and confidence through a series of acts and bills. Many important changes in the political world surfaced, and Roosevelt focused on the issues of banking, agriculture, and industry. In an effort to fix this, the government created things such as the bank holiday, which was soon followed by the passing of the Emergency Banking Act bill, which called for an inspection on all banks by the Treasury Department before allowing them to reopen. This ultimately ended the banking crisis. Immediately after, Roosevelt went to Congress with the Economy Act, convincing Americans that the federal government was being taken care of, and provided salary cuts of government positions and pension reduction of veterans of 15%. In June of 1933, Roosevelt signed the Glass-Steagall Act, giving the government permission to control irresponsible banks. This soon led to the Federal Deposit Insurance Company, which benefited those whose banks were failing. Another issue was the stock market. Congress passed the Truth of Securities Act of 1933, requiring corporations to provide accurate information about themselves, and police the stocks with the Securities and Exchange Commission in 1934. Agriculture. Congress passed the Agricultural Adjustment Act in 1933, explaining that producers of certain crops were to decide on a production limit for their crops. This rose the prices of the crops, increasing farm income and improving the farming economy. This mainly affected large farms, as small farms were not generally favored by the AAA. This act was soon shut down by the Supreme Court, who argued that the government had no right to put a limit on produce, but the Soil Conservation and Domestic Allotment Act mimicked it, while still being constitutional. The Resettlement Administration and the Farm Security Administration sought to loan money to farmers to relocate their farms to better soil, but it did not help enough to make a significant difference. The Rural Electrification Administration of 1935 had larger effect on farms by providing them with electric power for the first time. Industry. For years, the United States Chamber of Commerce had been suggesting the permission of trade associates to stabilize their prices, but no one felt comfortable with it until the Roosevelt administration stepped up, which later resulted in the National Industrial Recovery Act. A new federal agency arose out of this, the National Recovery Administration, along with the Blanket Code, which included the abolition of child labor in industries, among other things. But the NRA failed soon after due to a decline in industrial production. In conclusion, the Roosevelt administration offered many beneficial and some non-beneficial ideas that did indeed transform, and it helped to bring federal relief and regional planning like the Tennessee Valley Authority forth, along with additional administrations. Although there were no specific similarities between Barack Obama's plan and the ideas of the New Deal, the two both showed constant effort to help people economically.